the rookie who betrayed our lieutenant, and the revenge that ended his career. I joined the volunteer fire department in the early 2000s because I wanted to do something that mattered. I wasn't chasing glory or adrenaline, I just wanted to help people. The town's fire department had a volunteer program that trained regular folks like me to step up during emergencies. It wasn't easy. We trained hard, 2 nights a week plus all-day Saturdays for 3 straight months. That was just the fire side. After that came another 3 months of EMT training. It was a grind, but it shaped me. About a year in, something changed. I wasn't just the new guy anymore. I'd earned a little respect. I knew how to haul gear, run drills, and keep my head in the heat. That's when they asked me to help train the incoming academy class. It felt like an honor, and honestly, I was excited to give back. Helping others grow into the role just felt right. That's where I met Lieutenant Amy. And let me tell you, she was unforgettable. Amy was maybe 5 feet tall on a good day, but she had more fire in her than anyone I've ever met. Middle-aged, sharp as a whip, and absolutely fearless. She didn't take crap from anyone. You know the type. Someone who could make a grown man freeze with just a glance. She was a drill sergeant when she had to be, but off-duty, she had this huge heart. She used to bake cakes and drop off cookies at different stations. No one asked her to. She just did it because she cared. In the firehouse, respect isn't given easily. You've got to earn it through grit, consistency, and integrity. And Amy, she earned every ounce of it. People looked up to her, and not just because she could outwork guys twice her size. She set a tone. She led by example. She showed us what real leadership looked like. I admired her a lot. Still do, actually. That training class she and I helped with had some promising recruits, but it also had one very specific problem. A cocky kid we'll call Aaron, and trust me when I say, Aaron had no idea what kind of world he was stepping into. Aaron strutted into the academy like he was auditioning for an action movie. Young, probably early 20s, with a chiseled jaw and that cocky all-American I'm better than you energy. You know the type. He talked big. Loud, confident, full of stories about things he'd done or seen, none of which made sense for someone with zero actual firefighting experience. If you didn't know better, you'd think he'd already single-handedly saved a family from a burning building and then carried a puppy out for bonus points. But when the drills started, the truth surfaced fast. He was fine. Not terrible, but not great either. Middle of the pack. He could haul a hose, climb a ladder, and do all the things we trained for. But there was no finesse, no humility. Everything he did with a look that said, "Are you watching me?" It was like he believed the academy was just a formality. Before he moved on to become the next national firefighting icon. When the class graduated, assignments were handed out, and by sheer dumb luck, Aaron landed at Amy's station. It was one of the quieter stations in the department. Mostly medical calls, minor fires, false alarms. Nothing like the chaos he probably thought he'd be diving into. But it was a solid place to learn under a strong leader, especially someone like Amy who believed in mentoring her crew. I remember thinking, maybe this is good for him. Maybe Amy will straighten him out. She'd dealt with cocky types before and usually turned them into respectable firefighters. But Aaron, he wasn't just cocky. He was entitled. And that's a much harder fix. Still, I tried to stay out of it. He wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own crew, my own responsibilities. But the firehouse is a small world. Word travels. And it didn't take long before his name started popping up in casual conversation. And not in a good way. At first, it was small things. Disrespectful comments, rolling his eyes during briefings, ignoring protocols. But then came the story that really turned my stomach. And once I heard it, I couldn't let it slide. It was a slow evening at our station when Amy dropped by unannounced. She strolled in with that no-nonsense swagger and a giant box in her hands. Inside, a full half of the infamous Motherlode cake from Claim Jumper. If you've never had it, imagine a 6-layer chocolate monster capable of knocking out even the most sugar-hardened firefighter. Amy smiled and said, "Figured you guys might appreciate this." And we did. Absolutely. Turns out she'd taken her entire crew, including Aaron, out to Claim Jumper as a treat. No birthdays, no celebrations. Just Amy being Amy. Kind. Generous. Always doing more than she had to. 8 people. Full meals, drinks, appetizers, and the enormous cake. On her own dime. For some of us, that kind of gesture might have been once in a career. For Amy, it was just a Tuesday. We thanked her like she was royalty. She brushed it off with a laugh and said something like, "You guys work hard, someone should show you it's appreciated." Then she waved us off and left, probably to bake muffins or patch up a rookie's bruised ego. That's who she was. After she left, we devoured the cake, shared stories, and talked about how lucky we were to have someone like Amy around. Not just for the cake, but because of the way she led. You wanted to make her proud. You wanted to earn her respect. That night stuck with me. But a few days later, I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold. I was messing around on MySpace, which, at the time, was how everyone kept in touch, and decided to look up a few people from the department, just for fun. Reconnect. maybe trade a few jokes. I typed in Aaron's name. His profile popped up immediately. What I saw on that page shifted something in me. At first, it was just curiosity. I figured I'd see some shirtless gym photos, maybe a few cringy quotes. Typical young guy bravado. But Aaron's page? It was next-level delusion. Front and center was a photo album titled Squad Goals. The cover photo? Him and the other. Rookies at claim jumper, laughing, posing, drinks in hand. And there was Amy, right in the middle, grinning like a proud mom. The caption underneath read, "Free dinner courtesy of the old lady. Ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. Might as well take advantage of her stupidity." I froze. Stupidity. That word echoed in my head like a fire alarm. He wasn't joking. There were dozens of comments, some from girls he was clearly trying to impress, where he bragged about how much he ordered, how he milked it for all it was worth, how Amy was too dumb to notice, like she was just some naive sugar. Mama, instead of the veteran firefighter who'd carried half the damn department on her back. And it didn't stop there. He had videos up of himself training, overlaid with dramatic music like he was some war hero. He talked about storming burning buildings, saving lives, and being the real deal. All lies. Aaron had barely graduated. He hadn't even been certified as an EMT yet. His biggest contribution at that point was carrying equipment and fetching water. And yet, here he was, strutting across his digital stage, soaking in likes and flirting with girls who didn't know better. Trying to play the hero in a story he hadn't earned. I kept scrolling, hoping maybe this was just a one-off, a stupid mistake. But post after post, comment after comment, it became clear. Aaron wasn't just arrogant, he was a fraud, a liar. And worst of all, he was spitting on the generosity of someone who had only ever tried to help him. That was the moment something shifted in me. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was livid, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I stared at his MySpace page for what felt like hours. Each post was a punch to the gut. Each smug caption felt like it was mocking not just Amy, but everyone who actually took this job seriously. I remembered the cake. I remembered the long nights Amy spent training recruits, running drills, staying late, giving more than anyone ever asked of her. And now I saw this kid, this punk, openly mocking her for it, using her kindness as a punchline. It made me sick. But more than that, it made me angry, because it wasn't just about Amy anymore. It was about what it meant to wear that uniform, to earn your place. Aaron had skipped the hard part and jumped straight into the role of hero in his own fantasy. And worse, he was dragging down someone who had spent years actually doing the work. At that point, I realized I had two choices: ignore it and hope someone else eventually called him out, or take a stand. I chose the second. I started by printing out every post, every photo, every bragging comment I could find. His words in his own handwriting, no exaggeration, no misinterpretation, just his raw stupidity on paper. Then I made copies. Lots of them. Every fire station in our department had a common room, a place where guys hung out between calls, where notices got pinned, where gossip traveled like wildfire. So I visited each one, slipped a copy into the common room inbox, left one in the rec area, taped a few to the cork boards under general announcements. And because we were still rocking old school tech, I used our department paging system. The kind where you could send out text messages across stations. I kept it short, just a line or two. Check out what Aaron really thinks of Amy. His MySpace is still up for now. Attached was his profile link. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. Within an hour, the entire department was buzzing. It didn't take long. I was still at my own station when I heard the first reaction. Someone from the next room let out a long, loud whistle. "Yo, did you guys see this? Aaron's toast." Laughter followed. Then someone else came in holding one of the printouts. Word was spreading, fast. The paging system message had done its job. Everyone in the department had seen it. People were talking, sharing the printouts, going straight to his profile to see the trash for themselves. It was like setting off a chain reaction, one little spark, and suddenly the whole network was lit up. Aaron didn't stand a chance. I refreshed his MySpace page about 20 minutes later. Half the pictures were already gone. By the hour mark, all the posts had vanished. A few hours after that, the page was completely deleted. Vanished like it had never existed. But it was too late. The damage was done. Because the truth? Once something circulates through a firehouse, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Reputations are built slowly, but they can collapse in a single afternoon. And Aaron's collapsed hard. I never saw him again after that. He stopped showing up to his assigned shifts. No explanation. No farewell. Just disappeared. A few weeks later, someone mentioned he'd formally quit the department. No one seemed surprised. No one seemed to miss him either. It felt satisfying. Not because I wanted to ruin someone's life, but because what he did, what he said, was so deeply disrespectful to someone who had given so much. Amy had poured her heart into leading that crew. She'd invested time, money, energy into people like him. And for what? To be mocked behind her back by a kid who hadn't even earned his stripes? No, That didn't sit right with me. It never would. So I made sure he felt the weight of his actions, and that everyone else saw it too. A couple of weeks after the dust settled, Amy stopped by our station again. This time, no cake, just her usual calm, composed self. But I could tell something was different. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I waited until we were alone, then pulled her aside. I was the one who sent the page, I said. About Aaron, I saw what he posted. I saw what he said about you. For a second, she didn't say anything, just looked at me, and when she finally did speak, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I figured, she said. Then she looked away. For a moment, and I saw it. Real hurt in her eyes. Not rage, not outrage, just disappointment. Amy had built her whole career on believing in people, investing in them, and Aaron had taken that generosity and turned it into a joke. I'm sorry, I added. I just couldn't let him get away with it. She gave me a small nod. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. That was it. No speeches, no grand gestures. Just a moment of shared understanding between two people who actually cared about the badge they wore. After that, Amy bounced back like she always did. She kept training recruits, kept leading with the same fierce integrity that had earned her everyone's respect in the first place. A few years later, I heard she'd started dating one of the fire chiefs, someone else who had helped out at the academy. They eventually got married. Last I saw her, she looked happy. Really happy. Like someone who had finally gotten the kind of partner she deserved. We eventually lost touch, but I still think about her from time to time. And as for Aaron, I have no idea what happened to him. Maybe he tried to start over somewhere else. Maybe he grew up. Maybe he's still telling stories that don't belong to him. But I know one thing for sure. He learned, loud and clear, that in our world, you don't disrespect the people who carry you, especially not someone like Amy, because sometimes the quiet ones, we fight back harder than anyone expects.
You've heard the case. While you consider your verdict, the court calls the next case to order.
The CEO laughed off my bonus. The court wiped that smile off his face. I joined a small startup in the early 2000s, full of idealism and ambition. It wasn't the money that lured me in, far from it. The salary they offered was, well, let's just say it was survivable, not comfortable. But I didn't care. I was hungry to learn. The work was deeply engaging, challenging, and filled with the kind of complexity that teaches you real skills, the kind you carry with you for life. So even though the finances were tight, I told myself this would all be worth it. I could feel it. This job was going to launch my career. Now, part of the agreement was that there'd be no paid overtime, and I was fine with that. On one condition. We agreed I'd be evaluated after 3 months and then annually. It was all pretty standard. No tricks, no traps, just a fair startup hustle. At least, that's what I believed at the time. Fast forward 3 years. Not 3 months, 3 years. I'd helped bring in 10 strong clients, kept a dozen more in active trial phases, and the company had a healthy stream of money coming in. We weren't talking millions yet, but we were stable, we were growing, and the promise of future success was no longer a fantasy. It was tangible, and I was still on that same salary, working unpaid overtime almost daily. So I brought it up. Not aggressively, just reasonably. Discussions about back pay and paying overtime finally started to happen. Everyone, including management, acknowledged it was overdue. Since back pay for overtime wasn't technically legal in our region, the workaround was calling it a discretionary bonus. Fine. Call it what you want, just pay what's owed. The sum by then? Around $50,000. But I wasn't greedy or demanding. If cash flow was a problem, I even suggested they offer me discounted equity instead. That was legal, and I genuinely believed in the company's future. I wasn't looking to cash out. I was trying to build something with them. At first, it looked like they were considering it. We had email exchanges, documents, written confirmations. It all felt professional. I was secure in the idea that they wouldn't screw me over. Why would they? We were building this together, except the tone started to shift. Suddenly, things were taking longer. We'll get back to you. We need more time. The kind of vague, slow-stalling responses that start to set off quiet alarm bells in your head. Still, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. And that's when they made the offer. An equity stake. Sounds fair, right? But this wasn't equity in the company I had helped grow. It was equity based on a fictional valuation. According to their figures, the company was now worth hundreds of millions of dollars, despite having just 9 employees and a projected annual turnover of maybe $2 million. Under that math, my reward would be less than 0.01% ownership. Basically worthless. It wasn't just insulting. It was a calculated slap in the face. That offer broke something in me. After all the overtime, the weekends lost, the personal sacrifices, this was their idea of fair compensation? A microscopic stake in an imaginary fortune? I sat there staring at the numbers in disbelief, the email still open on my screen. It wasn't just a lowball, it was a middle finger. So I responded the only way I could. I resigned, effective immediately. Now, technically, I was still under the terms of my original contract. Remember the one the CEO refused to update despite years of work? That meant I had a 1-month notice period, plus a backlog of unused paid leave. And thanks to the wording in the contract, that effectively meant I didn't have to work another single day. Not one. When I handed in my resignation, that day, the CTO went pale. Total panic. My role wasn't easy to fill, and they hadn't seen this coming. They thought I'd just swallow the insult and keep grinding away like I always had. They thought wrong. I packed up my things, walked out, and never looked back. The very next morning, I sent a registered letter to the company, formally requesting payment for my accrued overtime and the so-called discretionary bonus they dangled in front of me. I knew they'd reject it, and they did. Formal language, no bonus, no overtime pay, nothing was owed. They closed the letter as if it were a done deal, but what they didn't know was this. I'd already spoken to a lawyer. See, in that region back then, legal action wasn't common. Most employees just moved on and grumbled to their friends. Lawsuits were rare, and employers knew it. They banked on your silence, but I wasn't staying silent. Not this time. With the attorney's help, we reviewed everything. Emails, timelines, the contract, labor law. And here's where it got interesting. Legally, employers in our jurisdiction were fully liable for unpaid labor. There were no gray areas. If you worked and weren't paid for it, that was on them. No exceptions. And there was one more detail, one that would become the centerpiece of my plan. The law allowed 7 years to make a claim. But in cases of unpaid wages, not only could I still file after 6 years, I could demand interest. At 9% above base rate, compounded daily. At that time, that meant over 12% annual interest, growing every single day the payment was overdue. Most people would have jumped on the chance to settle fast. But me, I saw an opportunity. A long game. Instead of filing the claim immediately, I asked my attorney a bold question. What happens if we wait until just before the 7-year deadline? He raised an eyebrow, so I explained. If we waited until the 6 years and 11 months mark, the interest on the unpaid amount would be massive. Remember, the original unpaid overtime was around $50,000. At over 12% interest, compounded daily, that number was going to snowball. And according to the law, that interest was owed, not optional. There was a risk, of course. If the company folded, I'd get nothing. But at the time, they were growing, making headlines, and clearly thriving. I decided the gamble was worth it. I'd already been cheated out of what I earned. Waiting a few more years just meant they'd pay what they should have paid in the first place, plus every cent they tried to save. So I played it cool. I moved on with my life, got a new job, kept climbing the ladder, built the career I always wanted. But every now and then, I'd check in on that old company. They were doing well, surprisingly. Well, actually, the CEO was still there. They expanded their client list, even moved into a bigger office space. Meanwhile, the clock kept ticking. At the 5-year mark, I sent them a final letter, another registered one, stating that unless full payment of all owed and accrued amounts was made immediately, I would pursue legal action. They ignored it again. Perfect. Because at that point, I wasn't trying to get them to pay voluntarily. I was just adding more fuel to the fire. Every day they refused to pay was another few dollars in interest, another tally mark on the legal timeline. I wanted them to get comfortable. I wanted them to believe they were off the hook. And I wanted to make sure there'd be no escape when the time came. Almost 7 years to the day after I left that company, I walked back into my attorney's office, file in hand, every email printed, every letter documented, and every piece of communication backed up. We filed the claim. The total amount I was demanding at that point, $112,000. That was just the back pay plus the interest that had been snowballing for years. But that wasn't even the final number. See, as we were going through everything, my attorney pointed out something else I hadn't even factored in. Under the labor laws, there were fixed penalties for each instruction given to an employee to perform uncompensated overtime. Every single, "Can you stay late and finish this?" that was never followed by compensation could now be monetized. When the final paperwork was filed, the full claim totaled around $135,000. Let that number sink in. From their perspective, this came completely out of nowhere. They hadn't heard from me in years. They assumed the silence meant I had given up. But now, nearly a decade later, they were being dragged into court over a discretionary bonus they thought I'd forgotten. And not just that. They were being hit with one of the largest individual compensation claims their company had ever seen. And the CEO? Oh, he lost it. I got a phone call the same evening we filed. I didn't answer it live because I had a hunch what it might be. I let it go to voicemail and set the recorder, and wow. The voicemail was everything I expected, and more. He screamed, cursed, called me every name in the book. He accused me of betrayal, of setting him up, of trying to ruin him. He sounded completely unhinged, which for me was gold. Because, in our jurisdiction, recorded abusive communication tied to a legal proceeding could be submitted as evidence, especially when it demonstrated the attitude and intent of the defendant. So we added it to the file. Every furious word, every insult, And when the day in court finally arrived, the judge listened. From the moment the judge hit play on that voicemail recording, the mood in the courtroom shifted. The CEO's voice, loud, furious, slurring, insults, echoed through the chamber. It wasn't just unprofessional. It was damning. Any shred of sympathy the judge might have had for the company evaporated with every expletive-laced sentence. And the worst part? That was just the opening act. Once my attorney presented the full chain of emails, including the ones acknowledging the unpaid overtime, the so-called bonus, and my requests for fair compensation, the judge's expression turned from annoyed to outright disgusted. It was all there in black and white. Company management knew I had worked overtime. They acknowledged discussions of compensation. They offered a worthless equity deal instead of actual payment. And then they stonewalled me for years. The defense tried to argue it was all discretionary, but the evidence showed intent to mislead. The judge made it clear. Discretionary doesn't mean optional, not when work was performed and acknowledged. Then came the final blow. The judge ordered the company to pay the full $135,000, immediately and without delay. On top of that, they were required to cover every cent of my legal fees. And as if that weren't enough, the judge notified the Department of Labor, triggering a full audit into the company's wage practices. The room was silent except for the sound of the CEO's jaw hitting the floor. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I waited. Just 1 week after the ruling, the company paid up. Every last cent. I watched the balance hit my account with the kind of satisfaction that doesn't come from greed. It came from justice. I had waited nearly 7 years, but in the end, they gave me everything they owed, and more. But the story didn't end there. That same night, mere hours after the court handed down its decision, the CEO apparently decided to drown his rage at the local bar. Witnesses said he was drinking heavily. Maybe he thought blowing off steam would help him forget the public humiliation. Maybe he didn't care anymore. Either way, it was a terrible decision, because not long after leaving that bar, he got behind the wheel of his brand new Mercedes S-Class and drove it straight into another car. He was arrested on the spot, charged with a DUI, and promptly had his license suspended for 6 months. As for his car, totaled. And the insurance company? They refused to pay a dime. Driving drunk voided the coverage. In one day, he lost the case, lost his money, lost his license, and wrecked his car. He had laughed off my bonus years earlier. But now, no one was laughing. That court decision didn't just pay me back. It wiped the smirk off the man who thought he could underpay, undervalue, and underestimate the people who built his company. And it reminded me, and hopefully everyone else watching, that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's patient, strategic, and hits right when they least expect it.
The case has been heard. The stories have been told. Now it's your turn to judge. Leave your verdict in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. The Court of Stories is always in session.